Hello, it is Saturday, June 23rd, 2012. This is Father Gus Franklin. I'm here with Colonel Jack Moelmann. We are located in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Actually, we're here for a wedding, in fact, the wedding of one of Jack's nephews. That's to take place later this evening.
Can hardly wait.
But in any case, this is the second part of an interview we did yesterday. First, Jack, there are a couple of items I think we'll play catch up about the most spectacular venue you've ever had for a concert. Of course, that was Radio City Music Hall.
Yes, it was. And it was. What do you wanted me to talk about?
Using the screens, the sing-along.
First of all, the music hall people had never experienced anything featuring the organ. You know, they have these other shows and the Rockettes, and we were talking about the price of this. I wanted to have the Rockettes do about a 2-minute, maybe little thing with canned music. They wanted $90,000 just to have them do that, so obviously that didn't play into it at all. I did want to have a sing-along. I chose not to do a silent movie because that was going to get too complicated, but the sing-along, and then my closing for every program, which is Tribute to America, which has a little film clip that goes with it. They've got, or they had then anyway, these 2 big projection screens hung on either side of the stage from the Tony Awards that were there. And I thought, well, while they're there, let's see if we can't use them. Otherwise, they were going to charge me to take them down. Well, as it was, they were going to charge me $6,000 to use them. But I said, well, we have a computer with a PowerPoint sort of thing. They wanted me to have this thing in a movie DVD format, so all the operator had to do was I hand them a disc, they stick it in, to push a button, and it would go with all the words and everything. It was never going to work out. So finally, at the last minute, they said I could bring my own computer and have our own operator change the slides and start the movie and so on. The only requirement was that they had to provide the power to it and connect their video equipment to my computer. Well, we're there, and they're all chasing around trying to find me with the computer. I put it on the stage, in the backstage on the table. I said, well, here we are, let's go through this. Well, obviously the first thing to do was, where do I plug this in? I mean, the power. Well, we need to get an extension cord. Remember, $43,000 I'm paying for these stage people. So finally, they find a plug where we can plug it in. And the next thing was the cable, the video cable, output of the computer to their system. And they had a full-time guy sitting at the end of the table that was going to be the one turning this thing on and off. And he's looking at his wire that he had, and he looked at my computer, and he says, this isn't going to fit. Well, he didn't even know where it was going to go. I said, give me the wire. And I took the wire, and I stuck it right in the plug where it would go, which is the VGA monitor plug, and we were off and running. For the next, I don't know how many hours, that guy paid by the hour out of the $43,000. Sat there, and his only function was to turn the screens on and off. Another part of this thing was I had written out all the stage notes, which aren't too complicated. I mean, what? You got different people playing, an announcer that came out, an MC. They didn't like the way I wrote it out, so we had to sit down at the table and do it all over again. It was an experience because they had never done anything like this. Just one little vignette that happened. Lou Williams was one of our concert organists during this program, and I believe it was in the second half, and he started playing the William Tell Overture, Lone Ranger theme. Well, Walt Stroney was back there, as was everybody else, and Walt said to me, Jack, you need to run across the stage and pretend like you're riding a horse. And I thought, well, that's sort of crazy, but I said, well, why not? I didn't have my coat on or anything else. I asked one of my $43,000 crew who was back there to get me a broom. They brought me a brand new broom. And the stage manager, this girl, she says, now what are you going to do with that? And I said, I'm going to ride across the stage, just pull the curtain apart at the side. Well, we can't do that because we haven't rehearsed it. I said, most of the show we haven't rehearsed. I said, just get out of my way and open the hell. We don't do that here. I said, you're about to. And they opened up the curtain, and I rode the broom across the stage without even my tuxedo coat on. And of course, everybody laughed. Lou Williams playing the thing over there, he couldn't see the stage, so he didn't know. They thought they were laughing at him. And so this was another episode where the music hall got an experience they'd never experienced. We had several of those sorts of things.
And speaking of experiences, Jack, how did you deal with all the media coverage?
Well, you know, this all started with an item released to the Associated Press through a friend of a friend of a friend. And the highlight of the main topic was Air Force Colonel, retired Air Force Colonel, spends life savings to live a dream. The dream being playing at Radio City Music Hall. At some points it turned into a nightmare, but the news people started calling a couple weeks before. At the event, they were all over the place. I mean, I felt sorry for our president and congressmen that have these people following them all over the place. And they were. NBC News, for example, had a full-time photographer that clicked every time I did anything. And when the final newspaper reviews and everything came out, there weren't that many pictures considering they'd taken 500 and 600 of them. The music critic was from New York Post, I believe, and I've quoted his final line out of his critic review, which says, "The world needs more Jack Moelmanns, people that do music for love rather than money." Something to that effect. That's close to a quote. The CBS Evening News, they were chasing all over. Steve Hartman, I believe was his name. And they came up to the dressing room. I wouldn't let them in at first. And in fact, the music hall had a public relations person that sort of allowed them to be places where, and for certain times, so they wouldn't harass the star of the show, if you will. I didn't mind it up to a point because I was after whatever publicity we could get for the show, plus the theater organ and all. The show was on Saturday night. We stayed over an extra day just to relax and went home on Monday. Damn if they weren't on the airplane. CBS News people on the airplane following me home. Got home the next day, they had a whole crew there from the local CBS affiliate, and all of this to produce a rather lengthy item on the CBS Evening News. That was sort of it, but it got a lot of publicity. I think people will admit in the theater organ world, this was the most publicized event. We did a Google search, and we come up with over 500 mentions of it in publications, TV and radio around the world. In fact, in my wall where I have memorabilia from the program, I've got page 2 of the Tokyo News. I have no idea what it says, but there's my picture.
Speaking of pictures, Jack, there's one that I've seen in many bits of media coverage that pictures you wearing the shirt you have on right now.
Well,
Yeah.
it is. In fact, that picture that was taken, I think we talked about it in the first episode, seated at the music hall console on the Howard seat when the thing didn't even work. And it was in I don't know how many publications.
Right. Okay. All of this was in response to a question about the most spectacular venue. What was the worst venue at which you had to perform?
Well, I guess there have been several of them, but probably the worst one I ever had to experience was in Pella, Iowa. Now, that's a little town of Dutch descent, I guess. And it's the home of the biggest company there, and they make windows, Pella windows. They have an opera house that seats about 300 people, sort of a new one, very small stage. But they put in, I think, about a 13 rank Barton pipe organ, or they were in the process of it. They wanted me to do the initial concert on that organ. And I said, sure, I'll come up there, because it was also the anniversary or the birthday of Mrs. Pella Windows, the owner of the company. And I won't give the name of the technician. And I talked to him on the phone, and he says, oh yeah, the organ's going to be in great shape. So I got there, and beautiful auditorium, like a beautiful console. It's on a lift, a Barton 4-poster lift. I said, well, let's turn it on and let's see what this thing does. Well, there aren't any pipes in the chest. They're just the chests. And they're not even wired in, some of them. And I thought, my gosh, what are we going to do? Well, he said, we can put some chests in, we can put some pipes in. And the pedal wasn't even connected at all. And the concert was the next day, and we were going to do a silent movie and a sing-along. Well, to make a long story short, they dragged some pipes out of the basement. We had a string Celeste rank, a flute, or maybe it was a tibia, and some sort of a reed, I think probably a clarinet, and hooked up a 16-foot board, and that's all I had. And I thought, how are we going to do this? The trims didn't work unless you held the valves open. Swell shades were iffy at best. And here was this dinner party, and everybody in tuxedos, and they were expecting a concert. And here we were wiring up and tuning at the last minute. Now the technician, he says, you know, we got the string in here and we got the string Celeste. We're having trouble when I hold the note and tuning the Celeste rank. I said, forget the tuning of the Celeste rank, just make it unison, make it sound exactly like the other one. So I somehow, for an hour and a half, I did a silent movie, a sing-along with those 3 or 4 ranks, and it was torture. But the people loved it. They didn't know what they were listening to. Fortunately, I did come back a year or so later and do a full concert when the thing was working. But it was a torture to begin with.
Right. Okay. What we really wanted to cover in the second half, Jack, was some of your activities in the American Theater Working Society and some of the contributions that you have made to it.
Well, I think I said earlier in the first edition of this that I joined ATOS, the American Theater Organ Society, in 1967. And there were some gaps in there where I was just a member receiving the magazine, barely knowing what a theater organ was. It was really when I came back from Germany in 1971 that I joined some chapters. I came to Norton Air Force Base, which is in San Bernardino, California, played an organ in the Shakey's Pizza Parlor. I think we talked about that earlier. And became a member of those chapters, and just as a member of it. As things evolved, I became a charter member in one of the original, that's charter and original are the same thing, in the Magnolia chapter in Biloxi, Mississippi. And I think that was about 1975. About 1983, I got a call from one of the people on the current board of directors at the time wanting me to run for the board of directors. And I thought, well, okay, why not? Fortunately, they didn't have too many people running, and I won the election, 1983. About 1984 or so, I was in Biloxi, Mississippi. Omaha, Nebraska, and had the opportunity to start a chapter there, the River City Theater Organ Society. So I started that one, was a member of, first member of another chapter. Today I'm a member of about 12 of them, trying to help them out however they need some help. I've done concerts for them. The chapters are the backbone of ATOS. Anyway, I joined the board of directors in 1983 and retired, took a leave of absence in 2006, which means I was on the board of directors of ATOS continuously for 23 years as its president, as a board member in many capacities, and I'm the only one that's ever done it that long.
You were secretary for how long?
Secretary for 13, 14 years.
And what were some of the contributions you made, Jack, as secretary?
Lots of dues.
No, I mean,
Well, as secretary, my job was to really record the minutes of what went on at board meetings for historical purposes. So you could go back 20 years from today and find out what went on if you wanted some details. Like I do with my business affairs of my life, I started keeping track of who were the past presidents, when they were, original people that came into this, events, conventions, where we were, logs of activity. In fact, I've put together a new booklet called The History of Board Actions, which are actions that have occurred in the board of directors over the years. So if you want to find out how the endowment fund, for example, evolved from when it started to where it is today, you can go back and read excerpts from the various minutes of the board meeting. So I have that. I've got a 30-page document of what organists played at what convention. And maybe nobody really cares, but if the question were to come up, who is the organist that has played at more conventions than any other? Everybody will go, duh, we don't know. They can guess at it, but it's Walt Stroney. So out of the 55 years of ATOS, or more than that now, he's played 38 of them. So I've got all of that available. Who's interested in it, I'm not sure. What I'm going to do with it is keep it for historical purposes.
you even have, I believe, an index of the articles in the journal, do you not?
I didn't start that, somebody else did, but I continued, I forget from what year, an index of all of the articles that have appeared in the Theater Organ Journal. So you can look it up by category, you can look it up by name, it'll give you an issue and a page number and the year of the issue.
Right. And all of this, of course, was over and above your actual duty as secretary to basically keep the minutes. And of course, it's extremely useful information for anyone who wants to know something about what happened in what year, who was the president, who was on the board, what policies were enacted, and so forth. And at one time, you used to have what we referred to as the big book, which...
it was called a binder, and
yes.
it was a 3-inch binder about so big that had all of these pages in it. It's gotten lost in the system because everybody's decided that they want it electronically. So it's in cyberspace someplace. Mine is still a book, but it's in my computer as well.
Right.
The biggest problem I have with this is I may have all this information available to anybody, but people don't read it. Everybody thinks that I'm an expert in ATOS. Okay, I probably am because I've been in it and worked it for a long time, but I also read a lot of things that have been done. And I don't have photographic memory, but at least I know where to look it up.
Very good. Thanks, Jack. Speaking of contributions to the theater organ world, not necessarily to ATOS as such, tell us a bit about this video project.
Well, that's Coke, by the way.
Yeah.
It was about a year ago March, that I thought we have a lot of organists and theater organ personalities, not just ATOS people, but personalities. We have their recordings, we may have their books, but the one thing that's lacking is people talking to it, an interview sort of thing, casual type, not a television production, but just sit down, hi, how are you? how did you start in music? The typical questions Father Gus here has been asking to memorialize the person, at least while they're still alive. One of the first videos I did of this, and this is not an ATOS project, I started it on my own, but it'll end up in the archives of ATOS, was Kay Maccabee. And he has passed since, and people have enjoyed watching the video of him being asked various questions. The real beginning of this was when Jim Riggs, famous organist Jim Riggs, was having medical problems, and he could have died. And I said, you know, we have recordings of him, but we don't have him saying anything. We don't have, I don't know of too many recordings of George Wright and others. There may be written interviews, but we don't have the dynamics of the person. So that's why I started it. As of today, I think I have 28 or 30 notables. And Father Gus here thought, well, maybe I'm one of those notables, so instead of being the moderator or the interviewer, I should be on the other side of the camera, so here we are.
Okay. And Jack, what do you see as the future of the theater organ and of ATOS?
Well, it's a hard question to answer. The theater organ is over 100 years old. In some cases, an automobile is over that time too. The automobile has been preserved in its original form as well as modernized, and it's what it is today. The theater organ is being modernized mainly in the way you play it, because it's got electronic features in it. The tonal quality of the thing is still the same. We haven't changed that. The biggest thing is trying to get young people, and even middle-aged people, to come and hear it. It's the ultimate in a stereophonic instrument. We have to also adapt what we're going to play on it. Playing the old songs from the 1900s are okay, but people don't relate to them. However, those songs have actually survived, where the modern things that people or kids are listening to, first of all, don't adapt at all or not well to the theater organ, and they're here today and gone tomorrow. But there is music. I grew up in the days of the Beatles and Elvis Presley. I didn't care much for it at the time, but there's a lot of music from the Beatles and from Elvis Presley that adapt very well to being played on the theater organ. The instrument is there. Unfortunately, they're not in the theaters in great quantity like they used to be. They're in people's homes, and in a few places they hear them in a pizza parlor. It's a musical art form that I hope would survive. And ATOS is the organization that needs to preserve it if it can, but we have to be clear that it doesn't get tangled up in too much administration and complication. It's the people, the presentation of the instrument by chapters, by conventions, public the magazine and everything, that will present it in such a way that it will intrigue people. I started out with this interview thing in chapter 1 about how I got started in music. I got started because I went to people's homes and here was keyboards and electricity and stuff, and I tinkered around. That's what we hope would intrigue people today. I'm the organist at the Fox Theater, and we play the tours here in St. Louis. And there are kids that come in. And if any of them's interested in playing a keyboard like some of them do, I let them get up and play the big 4-manual organ. They're scared to death of it. But they touch it, they feel it. Who knows who will come out of that in the future? People are very protective of the instrument because they think somebody's going to break it. So we lock it up and we don't share it with anybody. Well, I don't believe in that. Now, if they come in with peanut butter all over their fingers, I'm not going to let them play. But the future is there. It's what we, the people, not me, but everybody is going to make of the theater organ. And the Theater Organ Society, and the various chapters. The people are aging, they're not renewing, they're dying off. But we have a lot of young people that are starting to play the thing, and we just promote it. Don't promote it as an organ concert, because it doesn't work. Promote it with some sort of a theme. I could go on, and I don't have the answer to this, but I'm going to do my part in whatever years I have left.
And finally, Jack, do you have any specific advice for chapters in presenting this instrument?
Well, take the instrument and show it off in both a concert and even in private things. If you can arrange tours for school kids and get them in there. The biggest problem is getting them in the door. I think once you hear the organ, you can be intrigued with it because it's a stereophonic marvel. The dynamic range of it will shake your iPod and be more dramatic than some of these CDs and all that come out. Listen to people that have crazy ideas. There's no given solution to how to promote this thing. Just take the weirdest thing and see what can happen. The Radio City Music Hall is a typical example. Everybody thought I was crazy to do it, both financially or why even try. Well, we did it. It was successful. What the outcome is and what it did to the theater organ world was dramatic in the publicity that we got. Try it. Don't inhibit people who want to touch one at somebody's house, in the theater, and present it in such a way that it's got a theme. Concert, music of Irving Berlin, or music of this or that. Don't put down on the marquee Jack Moelmann or Jim Riggs or George Wright or whoever in concert. First of all, nobody knows those people. If you put one of these rock stars up there, you might attract a big crowd because they all know who he is. But they don't know any of these theater organists, so just introduce it that way. And the heaven's sakes, thank God they've never called it a recital. And it's a different instrument than the classical, the AGO has, church organs. But be creative, experiment, don't charge too much, and hopefully the organists that are playing that from out of town won't charge too much. If I'm not an expert at playing, but there are people that are far better than me, but I'm an entertainer, making this instrument an entertainment experience. I tell the people if I hit a wrong note, it's an arrangement. If you hit it too many times, it's an improvisation. Have fun with it, entertain the people, play stuff that they understand so when they go home they have a smile on their face. I guess that's it without going into getting it too complicated.
Okay. And we thank you very much, Jack, and we'll sign off there.
Thank you, Gus.